Warren Buffett famously has two rules for investing. Rule number one, never lose money. Rule number two, never forget rule number one. Simple, right? But how does he actually do it? Well, he hunts for what he calls wonderful companies at fair prices. So today, we're going to put a big one to the test, the payment technology giant Global Payments. We're going to run it through that exact same framework and see if it's truly a wonderful company or maybe one you should steer clear of. Let's dive in. Okay, before we go any further, we have to talk about this one idea because it's the bedrock of this whole thing. It's called a margin of safety. Basically, it's the gap between what a company is really worth, its intrinsic value, and the price you actually pay for its stock. You want that gap to be as wide as possible. Think of it as a financial cushion. It's what protects you if things go wrong. Finding this margin of safety, that's our number one goal today. So here's our game plan. We're going to put Global Payments through a four-part stress test. First, we'll see if it has a competitive moat. Then, we'll check out who's in the driver's seat. After that, we'll get our hands dirty and dig into the financials. And finally, we'll ask the million-dollar question. Is the price a bargain? Then and only then can we deliver the final verdict. All right, test number one, the moat. Now, if you think of a castle, the moat was the big ditch of water that kept invaders out. In the business world, it's pretty much the same thing. It's a company's durable competitive advantage that protects its profits from all the rivals trying to storm the castle. So the big question is, does Global Payments have one? So what does this company, Global Payments, or GPN as you'll see it called, actually do? Well, at its heart, it's the plumbing that lets businesses accept your credit and debit cards. Every single time you swipe or tap your card, a company like GPN is working in the background, making sure the money gets from A to B. And for that service, they take a tiny little slice. But it's more than that now. They've gotten smarter, building integrated software that helps businesses run their whole operation. So how exactly does GPN defend itself? Well, its moat really comes from a few places. The big one is high switching costs. I mean, once a restaurant or a retail shop gets all set up with GPN software and systems, pulling it all out and starting over with a competitor is a huge pain, a massive headache. They're also just enormous. They have huge scale and a vast network of partnerships with banks, which gives them a major leg up in getting new customers. So how wide is this moat really? Well, according to Guru Focus's analysis, it gets a score of 6 out of 10. Now, that's not bad. It's a decent, respectable moat. But it's not the massive, uncrossable fortress that Warren Buffett dreams about. So yeah, it passes this test, but let's be honest, it's kind of scraping by. Okay, so a decent but not great moat might be fine if you have absolute geniuses running the company. And that brings us to our second test. Who's running the show? Buffett loves to say you should invest in a business that's so good, any idiot can run it, because sooner or later, one will. But jokes aside, he places a huge amount of trust in having smart, honest people at the top. And when you look at GPN's management, it's really a tale of two cities. On the one hand, they're generally seen as credible, and you don't find any big, ugly scandals in their past, which is great. But, and this is a big but, there's a real concern about their strategy. They've been growing by making these gigantic, debt-fueled acquisitions, like buying up their rivals TSYS and Evo Payments. This buy strategy, especially with borrowed money, can be incredibly risky. And that risky strategy leads us directly to our third test, checking the financial health. Because a good story from management is one thing, but the numbers, well, the numbers don't lie. This is where we pop the hood and see if this engine is actually running smoothly or if there's smoke coming out. And oof, right away we see a flashing red light. Take a look at the gross margins. This is basically how much profit the company makes on each dollar of sales. 5 years ago, it was a healthy 42%. Today, it's slipped down to 38.5%. That trend is going in the wrong direction, and it tells you that competition is probably getting tougher and they can't charge what they used to. And then we get to this number. And wow, this one is a real head-scratcher. This is the return on equity, or ROE. It's a key measure of profitability. How much profit does the company make for every dollar shareholders have invested? GPN's is 2.4%. Let me put that in perspective for you. Buffett usually looks for companies that are consistently hitting 15%, 20%, or even higher. 2.4% isn't even in the same universe. That is shockingly low. But here's the twist. Here's the paradox of Global Payments.
In spite of those other weak numbers, the company has one massive strength. It is an absolute cash machine. We're talking about free cash flow, the real cash left over after all the bills are paid. And GPN generated about $1.6 billion of it last year. So this tells us that, deep down, the core business is still very healthy and very valuable, even if other metrics look a little sick.
All right, this all leads us to the final and, frankly, the most important test of all. We've looked at the business, the bosses, and the books. Now we have to answer the ultimate question. Is the price right? Because remember, even the greatest company on earth can be a terrible investment if you pay too much for it. We are back on the hunt for that margin of safety.
So when different analysts try to figure out what GPN is truly worth, you get a mess. The stock's trading at around 108 bucks. Some valuation models say it's overvalued, that it's really only worth something like $88 or $94. Another model says no, it's actually a bit of a bargain. When you see a spread like this, it screams one thing: uncertainty. And for a value investor like Buffett, uncertainty is the enemy. There is no obvious screaming bargain here, not even close.
And honestly, this quote from one of the analyses just hits the nail on the head. Global Payments seems to be a fair company. It's decent, but it's trading at a full price. And for anyone looking to buy in today, that critical margin of safety we've been talking about, it's just not there. Okay, we've run the gauntlet. We've put Global Payments through all 4 tests. We checked the moat, the management, the money, and the margin of safety. So it's time to put it all together and issue our final verdict. Does this company pass the Buffett test? And the answer, pretty clearly, is no. It fails the test. And let's just recap exactly why. First, the moat is just okay. It's moderate, not wide and wonderful. Second, the company's loaded up with debt from its aggressive shopping spree. Third, that return on equity metric is just way, way too low. And fourth, the final nail in the coffin, at today's price, there's no clear, obvious discount, no margin of safety.
So what does this all mean for you? Well, it leads to a two-part conclusion. If you're a new investor thinking about buying in, the recommendation is to avoid. It just doesn't clear that high bar that Buffett sets. However, if you already own the stock, it might be a hold. That incredible cash flow is the saving grace, and it gives you a reason to hang on and see if management can sort things out and get those returns up. And that leaves us with the ultimate question that every single value investor has to grapple with. You've got a fair business, like this one. So, at what price does it stop being just fair and finally become a truly wonderful investment? That's the puzzle.